So now that we've talked about what we need to change, we're going to go ahead and make those changes. So I already have the authentication file open. And the first change that we need to make is to our member DB context file. That is located in our models. Now, before you make the change, why don't you go ahead and run a build and just make sure that either it's up to date or that it's succeeded, because we certainly don't want to start with a problem file. Okay, and once you've checked that, then we're going to go ahead and open up member DB context. And we do need to modify this just a bit where it says, let's see, public member DB context. Let's see, right in here, we need to add a line. Okay, so right now we're specifying what the name of the table is. Above that, we have to tell it to use the default connection base. Okay, so public member DB context using the base default connection. So at this point, the application DB context and the member DB context are using the same base, and that is exactly what we need. Next change is to web config. And we're just going to modify the name of our database. In fact, I'm just going to copy and paste this entire connection string just to make sure it is correct. And so you'll notice the name is default connection. Okay, and then I changed the name to authentication1. Now, because I've already walked through this, I'm actually going to modify mine just a little bit more. But you guys can keep authentication1 because that will not be in your database listing yet. Now, once we do migrations, it is not going to be running through the initializer anymore. So at the bottom of our file, right below entity framework where we have the context, we're going to comment this out. And I'm just basically using the HTML5 comment. And let's do a little save all and run a build. Okay, and that did succeed. So at this point, we are ready for those migration commands. And remember, we have to run through them twice. So you do need to open up the Package Manager console. Okay, I already have mine open, but if yours is not, go to Tools, NuGet Package Manager, and choose Package Manager console. And we did do this already with Contasso, but that was simple because we only had one context file. Okay, so this is going to be a little more complicated. So what we're going to do is execute enable migrations, but then we have to give it a context type name, which is a parameter, and that basically indicates the location of the context file. And then we're going to give it a migrations directory, which is the name of basically the folder that we want all of our migrations stored in. Okay, so we've got enable migrations, the parameter context type name, which begins with the dash, and then there's a colon, and then this is the location of the context file. And then we have a dash migration directory, colon. This is the name that we want to use for our folder. So I'm going to press enter. And what you should see, I can see it shifted already, is it did create the data context migration folder. And inside we have a configuration file. And before I open that, I'm going to make sure it's done running, because I can see it's not. When it comes back with the PM prompt like it has now, it is done. And at this point, because we commented out the code that initializes the database, we have no seed data. Because you do migrations when you are moving from test to production, you can create a seed that is production data. And so we're going to pretend that we have production data, and we're going to do that. And that seed goes into the configuration file. So we're going to open that up, and you can see here's our seed method. Now we do need to add a couple using statements to the top here. One of them is using MVC demo, which is our project, dot models. And the other one is a using statement for collections. So we're going to use system dot collections. Of course, it's helpful if you spell it right. Dot generic. And I believe all of the other ones are correct. So we should have 6. Yep, we do. All right. So down here in our seed method, this is where we put our seed data. This is very similar to what we did in the member initializer. Okay, so if we take a look, here's what we have in the member initializer. Okay, we have our new memberships. And that is basically what we're going to be putting in that seed method. Okay, the only thing that we're going to change is the add. So you could actually copy this. Okay, and then go over to configuration and paste. Now, the only real change that we need to make to this is the add method. We want to do that upsert here, which is add or update. Okay, remember it's called an upsert. So if for some reason, if the row exists, it'll just update it. If it doesn't exist, it will add it. So at this point, we're going to do a little save, and we'll run a build. And then we're going to continue on with the migration commands for the basically member DB context. So we're going to come back over to Package Manager Console. And we've already done the enable. Okay, if we wouldn't have done the enable, we would not have a configuration file. So the next command we need to do is an add migration. And typically the first time you do the migration, you name the file initial create or initial. So we're going to do add migration, configuration, because we are actually creating a file here, MVC demo dot data context migrations dot configuration. And this is our initial create, so I'm going to call it initial. You could also call it initial create. Now, it's really important that we don't do a typo. What happens if you do a typo? You just redo the command. Okay, so if you're concerned about typos, you certainly can copy and paste from the lecture. Okay, and press enter. What you should see when it's done is in our data context migrations, there's going to be a file with a date stamp at the beginning, and it's going to say initial at the end. Okay, now at this point, the database has not been created yet. Okay, so what this initial file has, it has an up method that creates our tables. So you can see inside there, it's got the information for creating the table. And this is very simple because we only have one. And then it's got the down action method, which actually removes the table if there's a problem. So at this point, we are going to update the database, and it's going to use this information here to actually create our tables. And again, we have to be very specific about where this configuration file is located. So we can't just do update database like we did in Contasso because we have multiple context files. So we have to say update database, we have to do dash configuration, and then we're telling it where the configuration file is located. Okay? And then if you want to see all of the commands listed out, you can add the verbose parameter. I'm going to press enter. And again, this is the step if you're going to have errors, this is typically where it shows up. If it says running the seed at the bottom, you're usually home free and it's working. Yeah, this is what you want to see. That means it worked. So we've done the migrations on our first context, and now we need to basically do the same thing for the application DB context. Okay, and in case you're wondering where that's located, it's in the identity models file. Okay, that is where MVC puts it. And if you scroll down just a little bit, you can see here it is. And the base is specified as default connection, which is why we had to add that to the other one. So we're going to go ahead and enable migrations here. It's basically the same types of parameters that we did on the first one. You use enable migrations. You have to give it the context type name, which is the location, where it can find the context file. So we're just saying MVC demo project, the models folder, and this is the name of our file. Okay. Then we're also specifying the directory. They should put the classes it creates in, and that's the application context migrations directory, which it will be creating. Okay, so we'll see another folder in here. So I'm going to go ahead and press enter. Okay, at this point, it's done. And so we can see it up here. And if you wanted to look at the configuration file, just open it up. Okay, and that's what it looks like. And we're not going to do any seed data in this one. So we're just going to go ahead and run the add migration next. And so we're telling it where basically to put our configuration file, and that would be inside this folder. And we have to give that file a name. So we're going to use the same name that we did for the data. We're just going to call it initial. And it'll go ahead and put that date and time stamp at the beginning. Okay, and if you take a look at that, This is where you see the up and down methods. And the up method is creating the tables, and the down method is basically removing them. Okay, and at this point, the database has not been created. So we're going to use the update database command. And we're telling it again where our configuration file is, and we're using verbose so we can see all the commands. So at this time, we are done. I'm going to do a save all. Let me do a build. And let me run it. Now, if you were having a problem with the database before, let's say you were getting an error, it was probably because you had the default base and the other one didn't have the base specified. So now this should work. Okay, so I've got my members. Let me register. Okay, it's got me logged in. So no errors, everything worked. And if I go into members, if you remember, if you're registered, it lets you create new. But if I log off and I go into members, I should not be able to create a new one. It's going to require that I log in. Okay, so again, when I'm logged in, oops, it lets me go right into create or any of the other editing functions. But if I'm logged off, it does not.